Mets Minuters, it's me, Todd, back for another week of Mets Minute. Thanks for joining. We've got a great show ahead of us. Another guest, because we got such positive feedback from our guest last week, Avi, talking about a brave perspective. But before we get to that, I'd like to talk specifically about something that came up this week playing the Milwaukee Brewers and its trades, because it brought me back to last year when we almost made that trade with Milwaukee, sending Wilmer Flores and Zach Wheeler to Milwaukee for Carlos Gomez, who was originally a Met, and we're going to bring him back. I remember when that happened, I was really excited about it. I thought it was the bat that we needed to really turn around the season. And of course, we got cold feet at the last second. We said it was a hip issue with Gomez. Who knows what it really was, but the trade never happened. And thank God it didn't, because that meant not only did the trade not happen, but it meant we could go do a subsequent trade, which meant we brought in Mr. Yoenis Cespedes, who so far has around 37 or 38 homers in his under a year full-time with the Mets, which leads the major leagues. And he, of course, has 14 this year, which is tied for the lead as well. A big one yesterday to get the win. So that was amazing because of what it didn't happen in terms of what led to the Cespedes coming. But also, if you think about Flores, he's kind of had a more of just kind of like a cult following role with the Mets, but he's been good filling in for a lot of the positions that we've needed this year before he got hurt. But also, if you look at what our pitching's doing this year, we're going to need some reinforcement at some point, especially with what's going on with Harvey, and it seems like every pitcher's had an injury scare. So getting Zach Wheeler back at the end of July is going to be a huge infusion of ready-to-go talent, and really excited to have him back. So love that we didn't make that trade, love that we did make the Cespedes trade, and hopefully we can have him here for many years to come. Maybe we'll have Cespedes to Mets Minute Studios here at some point. We'll see if we can clear up some space for him. But it also brought me back to thinking about, from that trade to another trade, seeing Syndergaard pitch today. I'm going to go to the stat sheet. Syndergaard, he had back-to-back 10 strikeout games. That's the first time since, of course, Dwight Gooden in 1984. 76 Ks through his first 9 starts. That's the third most in Mets history, behind, of course, Tom Seaver in 1977, then, of course, Tom Seaver again in 1978. So these are some real numbers here going up against some of the greats in Mets history. And then 14.1 scoreless innings with a 2.33 ERA, best in the bigs. So it's fun to have him on the team. But how did we get him, right? Like, was he another one of our kind of farm guys that came up through the system, or was there some really horrible trade that another team made with us? That brings me to my next segment, which I like to call We the North, with our good friend of Mets Minute, Mr. Akshay. I'd like to welcome Akshay to the show. Akshay. Great to have you here,
It's an honor to be here.
Wow, this is really special. It's not every day, thank you, some great walk-in music. It's not every day that we get real, actual Canadians on the show. So huge pleasure to have you on the show today. I'd like to just get your perspective about this trade. So again, it was Syndergaard coming from the Blue Jays to the Mets, as well as our starting catcher, Travis d'Arnaud.
Yep.
For R.A. Dickey, who I think is 52 years old right now, going back to the Jays. Please tell me your thoughts about that whole thing.
So I'll preface this with just the comment that fans tend to be optimists. I've been a Jays fan since 1986, 1987.
And Canadians are optimists too, right?
Canadians are optimists. But I'd say just the comment on age is actually quite relevant. If you look at the great knuckleballers from Tim Wakefield, Phil Niekro, maybe you throw Tom Candiotti in there.
I'm going to throw him in there.
They typically peak around the age of 48, 49.
That's true. It's
so
a weird peak.
So I would argue
that
the jury's still out on this trade.
Really?
I think Dickey is just getting started. He tends to have slower starts to the season.
Yes.
And maybe if you look at his tenure with the Jays,
Yeah.
he's just having a slow start. He's just getting warmed up.
I never considered that. He's about to get better in his mid to late 40s. You've heard it here first on Mets Minute. That's brilliant insight.
It's a perspective to consider.
Which is maybe what we should rename this segment. A perspective to consider with We the North. Akshay, he's a real live person from Toronto, and we really appreciate you having on the show. Thank you for being here. And just to close things out for this week, last week we asked who's going to have a better season. Is that what we asked? We'll come back to what we asked last week. What we asked last week is not important. The question for this week is, this week, here's the question. of all the pitchers that aren't having great seasons, from DeGrom, who's kind of had a slow start, obviously Harvey's having a tough time. Cologne's been okay, but he's been more a cult hero with the homers than anything else. And then obviously Matz, who's actually doing quite well. Who's going to kind of turn the corner and challenge Syndergaard for being one of the better pitchers this year on the Mets? I think it's probably going to be Syndergaard, but who's kind of that second person that we can really rely on? Leave your comments in the comments field right below the video there. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll see you next week.